to a Hope 1032 podcast.
The Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Welcome to the Hope Book Club with Katrina Rowe and Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity. And today we're joined by Ellanda Joyce from the Little Lost Bookshop. Today we are featuring books on screen. So these are the books that get that little bit more airtime because they've been made into a big screen movie or a TV series and everyone's talking about them. Natasha has been reading The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. It's a historical drama set in 1893 about a young widow, Cora, who moves to Essex after escaping an abusive marriage. She finds the local village caught up in rumours and superstition about a mythical monster called the Essex Serpent. Cora develops a friendship with a local vicar called William Ransom, but their views on religion, superstition and science are constantly clashing. Ellanda has been reading A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. This is the story of a grumpy old man, Ove, and his relationship with a young family who move in next door. He's the kind of man who kicks cats and whinges at all his neighbours, but somehow they manage to win him over. The book's being made into a movie starring Tom Hanks in the lead role, but they've changed his name from the difficult-to-pronounce Ove and called it A Man Named Otto. And I've just finished reading Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owen. This book's been made into a film by Reese Witherspoon, starring Daisy Edgar Jones. Part murder mystery, part domestic drama, part nature doco. It's the story of a young girl, Kaya, who grows up alone on the edge of the marsh, surviving by her own instincts. When a young man from town is found dead in the marsh, it's natural for the townsfolk to blame the wild marsh girl. But do they really know her, or have they made her a monster in their minds? So some really great reads in this episode, but first, let's hear from The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry.
He thinks he sees, is certain he sees, the slow movement of something vast, hunched, grimly covered over with rough and lapping scales. Then it is gone. In the darkness he grows afraid. There's something there, he feels it, biding its time, implacable, monstrous, born in water, always with an eye cocked in his direction. Down in the deeps it slumbered, and up it's come at last. He imagines it breasting the wave, avidly scenting the air. He is seized by dread, his heart halts with it. In the space of a moment he's been charged, condemned, and brought to judgment. Oh, what a sinner he's been! What a black pip there is at his core! He feels ransacked, emptied of all goodness. He has nothing to bring to his defence. Out he looks to the black, black water, and there it is again, something cleaving the surface, then subsiding. Yes, all along it's been there, waiting, and at last it's found him out. He feels a curious calm. Justice must be done after all, and he willingly pleads guilty. It's all remorse and no redemption, and no less than he deserves.
And that is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. So this is a Gothic-style novel set in Essex in 1893. Cora is a widow who's recently moved from London and discovered the village is in the grip of a rumour that the dreaded Essex Serpent has returned. Cora's an amateur naturalist and she's excited by the idea that a mysterious creature may have survived from an earlier era. But of course, the superstitious villagers are suspicious of this free-thinking outsider and want to figure out what sinful evil has brought the serpent back. Natasha's been reading this one. Hey, Natasha.
Hey, Katrina.
So tell us about Cora. What takes her to Essex and what does she find there?
Cora's quite fun. I really like her. She's a bit weird and she doesn't really... Well, this is a classic, protagonist, particularly in historical fiction, but she doesn't like society's strictures and so on. So her husband has just died, and we find out very early on that her husband was a terrible human being who abused her. And so she's actually just so relieved that he's dead and that she's able to kind of be herself and live her life, and she doesn't have to pretend anymore. She doesn't have to kind of dress for dinner parties if she doesn't want to. She's a bit of a, she's beautiful and popular and so on, but she's also kind of just a bit of a loner and a scholar and likes her fossils and wants to wear men's coats and things and big boots and go hiking for miles and miles. So, she's got a bit of a wild woman persona.
There seems to be a resurgence of these kind of female scientist, nature sort of lover kind of characters popping up in fiction right now.
Yeah, I guess they're a kind of a fun way of looking at the time in terms of them not wanting to be frivolous socialites. But also, it gets to unpack some of the faith science conflicts or potential conflicts of the time and in quite interesting ways. So she, wants to kind of go and do what she wants to do, which she hasn't been able to do for years and years. And so she kind of has these various friends around her, friends she's made, friends she's newly making. And I think one of my favorite things about the book is that everyone, while being a bit weird and not likable, they're also really likable and they kind of really like each other, and they have a lot of fun talking to each other. And so that's quite enjoyable to read.
And so how do the vicar, Will, and Cora sort of come into each other's orbit, and how does their friendship develop?
So they're put in touch by another friend who is kind of, well, not really the frivolous socialite because he's a politician, but he's like a mover and shaker and connector. And he and his wife are good friends with Cora. And they also know Will, the vicar in this backwater village in the deeps of Essex on the estuary. And they're like, oh, you guys would really get on. We'll put you in touch because Cora, wanted to go out to Essex to look for fossils and also had heard these rumours of like a serpent in the waters that was, terrorising the villagers, and she's fascinated by that and wants to go out there. So he puts them in touch, and both of them are expecting something very different to what they get. So Cora's expecting, a dour, unimaginative, narrow old clergyman, and Will and his wife and children are expecting, some fat old widow who's, rich and frivolous and wants to waste her money coming and trudging around Essex. And so they're very surprised to find that each other is so young and so interesting and interested in so many things. And Will and Cora really strike up instantly this friendship, this very kind of intense, fun. They just get each other. They're kind of kindred spirits, and Cora gets on really well with Will's wife as well. So that, like, the kind of unconventionality of that, of this man and this woman who, Cora doesn't believe in God. Will is very open to science, as opposed to Cora's expectations of him. So they're an unlikely friendship, but kind of a really beautiful and compelling one.
Sounds quite touching. What did you think of Sarah Perry's portrayal of Victorian England? Because I read an interview where she said she wanted to sort of show the modernity of the era, not just pea soups and smelling salts, but was talking about the fact that, there were electric lights on the streets in this time. The tube was running. Yeah, how did you, I guess, relate to her version of Victorian England?
Yeah, I actually, because I suppose I'm more used to books from the middle of the 19th century, which often then again are set in kind of the first quarter of the century or a little bit earlier. And so I kept kind of having these moments of like, oh, wait, when is this set? Because it did feel very modern. I was like, oh, the tube, is this like the 1930s or something? And then I was like, oh, no. I had to like keep looking back and being like, oh, yes, 1890s. So I think she does that really well. And there's in an interview with her that's at the back of the book, she talks about her upbringing, that she was raised in a strict Baptist setting. So a kind of very, I suppose, old-fashioned sort of tradition. So there was no TV and no pop culture in their house. She learned embroidery and they read the King James Bible at meals and stuff. And so she's like, I'm more comfortable in 1895. That's a more natural setting for me. So you really feel like the sensitivity of how it's conveyed, and that these are real, relatable people and not kind of historical paragons of some kind.
At the same time, though, I think the novel, from what I've heard, is written as a Gothic novel. Is that right? And so did you like that aspect of it? Did you feel that it had strong Gothic elements?
Yeah, I like a bit of Gothic, whatever it really means. There's some debate about that. But because in some ways the serpent doesn't feature as much as you'd think. Like, it really does. But I think if you were reading it for the serpent, you'd expect some kind of more distinct sightings and dramatic events relating to the serpent. But for a lot of it, it's a looming presence in the background, and it means different things to different people. And it's more of a reflection of people's anxieties about stuff that's going on. So the villagers are having, conniptions about it, that, a lot of things are going wrong with crops and health, and, is God punishing us? And the serpent is kind of a representation of that. So it's this very strong presence in the novel, but you don't really find out what's actually going on for quite some time in the book. So it's kind of the promise of Gothic, but you're not quite sure for a long time whether it's going to deliver. Like I think of Hannah Kent's novel, The Good People, where you're trying to figure out if this kid is a changeling, like long story, Ireland back in the day. But throughout the book, you're like, oh, wait, is there such a thing as the world of fairy? Like, are there fairies? And like, what kind of novel am I reading? Is there going to be a mythical creature, or is this the world of science and, rationality that we live in, or that we think we live in? So I quite like that sort of, oh, wait, is this, I don't know where this is going. Is there a serpent? Is it, some ancient creature? Is it just a scientific thing, or is it, there's something really creepy out there?
So I was going to ask you what the serpent sort of represents, what the villagers are afraid of, but it sounds like it might be something different for every person.
Yeah, it functions quite differently for different people. And even like there are a bunch of things that are sort of reversed from your expectations. So, it's the vicar who's trying really hard to calm everybody's superstitions and their fire and brimstone kind of concerns, and to be like, let's be rational here. But that's not what they want from their vicar. They want him to kind of thunder at them and be like, this is a sign of judgment and here's what we should do about it, and offer some kind of atonement or whatever. And so, it's the kind of the man of faith who's being the rational one. Like there's an explanation for all of this, and just trying to kind of hold everything together for his parishioners. So he's someone who really could have been like in Parliament or been an engineer or something. And, Cora can't understand why he's buried himself in this like backwater village, but he really loves these people, and he, wants to be outdoors on the marshes and praising God in his work and in nature and everything. So he's a really compelling character. I quite liked him.
Yeah. Okay. So does the book pitch, science and facts against religion and superstition, or do you feel that it is a bit more subtle about recognizing that those things can be?
Yeah, I think it undermines that opposition.
Okay.
In ways that are not laboured, because the various oppositions are embodied really nicely in the different people. So it could be a simplistic, Cora is reason and science and modernity, and Will, the vicar, is, superstition and faith and irrationality. And it's just not like that, partly because they really like each other, and so they have these kind of knockdown, drag-out debates, but actually they're kind of on all sides of the questions. And Cora acknowledges that like some of the best science books she's read are by vicars, because, a lot of clergymen were naturalists in the like 18th, 19th centuries. So it's just not as simple as people think. And Will, really challenges her on like, well, yes, scientific theories and this theory and that theory and so on, but there's something bigger, and where do you get meaning and purpose, and where's your anchor among all those theories? And so he's like, it's perfectly rational to have faith. And she's quite challenged by that, I think, though not convinced.
Okay, interesting. So this sounds like it might be a book for people who do like Hannah Kent. I'm hearing a lot of resonance with how you review Devotion, that it sort of has those questions around faith, but very much grounded in the natural world. And
it's not nearly as depressing as Hannah Kent.
Okay,
that was going to be my question. Yeah. So I mean, it's in terms of the like recreation of a different time. There's some similarities. They both have very beautiful prose, though quite different sorts of beauty. But this is much more of there's something very kind of haunting and isolated and so on about Kent's work, I think, and her characters. Whereas this is like the hustle and bustle of Victorian society and all the different connections and the friendships and networks. And so I think it's lighter and more fun in that sense.
And so just to briefly touch on the TV show, Claire Danes plays the main part of Cora. I really think she's wonderful. Did you like the TV version?
So I've watched one episode so far of the series, which is on Apple TV, and I'm liking it so far. You know, they've made some changes, but it's beautiful, the sort of designs. That's like the cover of the book is really beautiful as well in the same way. So the clothes are great. So we haven't, you know, much got to Essex yet. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about the series.
Okay, sounds good. That's Natasha Moore. She's been reading The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. So Tom Hanks is starring in A Man Called Ove, which is being released over the summer of 2022-23, and it's an American adaptation of A Man Called Ove by the Swedish writer Frederick Backman. It's about a grumpy old curmudgeon who gets a new lease of life when a young family move in next door. A Man Called Ove was on the New York Times bestseller list for 42 weeks, so I don't know why they felt they needed to change his name for the movie, but there you go. So, Ellanda, what can you tell us about this grumpy old fella with the strange name?
Oh, this one is wonderful. It's I sort of understand the changing of the name because when you're reading the book in my head, it's just Ove, but when I thought about it, I was like, it's definitely not Ove.
Oh, I know.
But this book is a really beautiful kind of exploration of grief and memory and community and I guess what life is like without community and then the colour and joy that it brings when that is added in. Yeah, so Ove is a man in his late 50s. His wife has just died 6 months earlier. And he is forcibly retired from his job where they seem to feel that he's getting a bit old. But the death of his wife and not having work anymore leaves him feeling pretty purposeless and like what's the point of life at the moment. So he decides to sort of set his affairs in order and then that he's going to try and kill himself. And it's sort of at this point that he has some wonderful neighbours move in across the way and he meets them in quite a sort of what he finds annoying way as they reverse a trailer over his letterbox and he sort of has to step in and show them how to reverse a trailer properly. But it's this very colourful, mischievous Iranian woman and her husband who Ove thinks is very silly. He's a IT technician. He calls him the lanky one. But these people sort of elbow their way into Ove's life and sort of demand things of him, need his help, bring him food that he's never tried before. Their kids sort of make him drawings and things like that, and accidentally sort of continually frustrate his plans to end his life in somewhat comedic ways. And yeah, his life is changed forever.
So presumably he finds a will to live and they form a great bond. I guess that's where you would predict this story going. Frederick Backman, obviously he writes in Swedish, and so this has been translated into English. Did you find that the writing was still engaging?
Yeah,
or,
absolutely.
You know, is something lost in translation?
I mean, obviously I can never compare because I don't know enough Swedish to read the original, but it's really funny. It's full of humor, irony, sarcasm. I would find it difficult to think that too much has been lost. It definitely, like I've read a couple of Swedish novels and spent some time in Sweden, and I feel like it definitely has a Swedish sense of humor in that there's something of a dark sense of humor, but also maybe something of a conservatism. And I mean, I guess I've read a couple of books about Swedish old men, the other one being
the 100-year-old man who jumped out the window and disappeared or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes, that one. But Ove is a bit of a Ron Swanson character kind of thing from Parks and Recreation if you've seen that. So he's a man of great integrity, and for him that means like there's principle and there's also stubbornness kind of thing. So he believes that, you know, men are defined by their actions, not by what they say. But he also, will sort of get into decades long feuds over something that he can't quite remember. what happened and why he's not friends with his neighbor anymore, because it was the men used to drive a Volvo and went out one day and bought a BMW, and you can't reason with a man like that.
Because everyone has to drive a Saab, right? Isn't that his view of life?
That is the superior car, I believe. But also, why would you change, kind of thing? Very much you find a way to live and then you keep doing the things the same way. But it also means he's a man of immense practical knowledge, which becomes very helpful as he becomes invaluable to his neighbours. They very much need him, which, yeah, I found wonderful.
Ellanda, it sounds like it's not just him that changes, but that the neighbours also change their perception of him as they start to understand that he's useful and that he has knowledge and that there are things they can learn from him. Is that sort of how it plays out?
Yeah, to some extent. I think so the Iranian woman is Pavana. She shows up and sort of immediately, I would say, ignores the obvious perception of him, in that she shows up, he's very grumpy from the start. She is immediately making fun of his grumpiness, going, "Why aren't you friendly?" And he's, "Oh, I'm friendly. I just don't walk around with a big smile plastered on my face all the time." So she immediately decides to adopt him as a friend, I would say. So very much as the reader, you can be very persuaded by the early perception of him as a grumpy man, stuck in his ways, all those kinds of things. But I think the neighbours don't fall for that for very long, which is wonderful because the story is also interspersed with his history. So he had a beautiful wife who was all the light and colour and all the optimism to match his pessimism. And she was pregnant and in a bus accident and they lost the baby. So they have all these stories of just such a difficult, sad life that he's had. So you sort of come to see, oh, he's about as optimistic as he possibly could be, but also to see that he wasn't always a grumpy old man in a sense. Like he always has had those sensibilities.
So do you see any of his sort of previous romance playing out? You know, do you get glimpses of what he was like as a younger man and what his relationship with his wife was like when he was happier?
Yeah. So you get that full story, and it's really, really beautiful and shows his character. So he was orphaned at a young age. His father was also a man of great integrity. So you see stories of him choosing to be a good man at a young age and learning to build a house with the help that he finds along the way, and then having his world totally turned upside down when he meets this beautiful woman on a train and sort of does everything he can to follow her. So it's really charming and beautiful.
Yeah. So some of the reviews I read said it left them in tears. Were you one of those people who was sobbing at the end of the book? Did you find the story moving?
Oh, 100%. And probably a few places throughout as well. Yeah, there's some sad things, but also some just really, really beautiful moments. Yeah, so I was definitely really invested in Ove and his life and his past, and also just really rooting for good things to come for him and his little neighborhood, I guess.
And so can you see Tom Hanks in that role of Ove or Otto?
I can. It just occurred to me as you were describing the movie that it's probably not going to be set in Sweden and instead set in the US. So I can't help but feel that the story may lose something if it loses the Swedish sense of humor, in a sense. I'm sure it will still be charming, and I'm very keen to see it. I think it comes out potentially even on Christmas Day, and I'm sure will be a great sort of Christmas heartwarming film. And yeah, I think Tom Hanks is probably well cast.
Okay. Well, I think this brings us to our next point of discussion, which is, when they stuff up the movie, of a book, when you've loved the book, but the movie just doesn't quite sort of, cut it. It's getting to the point in our household where my husband is always very cautious to watch a movie with me if it is based on a book that I have loved, because he knows I'm going to sit there going, oh, why did they do that? And that's not what she's like, and blah, blah, blah.
You're talking about Persuasion, aren't you, Katrina?
Don't even get me started on that. I don't know what they were thinking. Kind of completely different character for Anne Elliot there, but anyway. So, look, what is your pet peeve when it comes to movie adaptations of books? What's the thing you can't get past. So I'll do my first by way of example. For me, I can't tolerate. I don't mind if they change little plot elements. I don't really love it when they change the setting, like, all the Leanne Moriarty books being set in America, because you do lose a lot of the humour. But that's not my pet peeve. My pet peeve is character assassination, right? So like Big Little Lies is an example. So in the TV show, Maddie has an affair. In the book, she just wouldn't do that. Probably the most extreme one is Faramir in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Peter Jackson sort of destroyed his character. He was this
Katrina, you're stealing my pet peeve. This is exactly what I was going to say, and exactly the same example. Also, Samwise a bit, that Samwise and Faramir are tempted by the ring, and in the books, they're just not.
Well, Faramir is the worst one because I feel like he has this deep morality. He's incorruptible, and they corrupted him, like just to give him some kind of character arc or something. But not everybody needs a character arc. Some people can just be like rock solid, and the others can react to them.
I feel like this is a thing where it's as though good or stable or whatever is boring, and therefore they need to have some terrible flaw. They need to, in order for us to be interested in them or to like them or to, make them worthy of the like drama. And I'm a bit like, well, if you can't, like in the book, it was like goodness was interesting, or, stability or just a normal life could be interesting. And if you can't make that happen in a TV, like why not? Why not?
Yeah. Well, I actually was at a writing conference not long ago, and the sort of keynote speaker said, I don't believe in character arc. He said, because with character arc, you have to start a character off terrible and then make them good. But if the character's terrible, no one will care.
Maybe we need more character arcs where people are awesome and then they become terrible. No, we have some of those. It's Shakespeare, isn't it?
Yeah.
That can be just depressing.
You could go from wonderful but naive to wonderful and wise. That would be a character arc.
Yeah, the coming of age novel. Yep.
Yeah, true.
Well, that's it. That's Emma, right? That's Emma.
Yeah. They've just fallen out of fashion. It's all about grey characters, and everyone needs to have the darkness within them.
So what's your pet peeve, Ellanda? If Natasha and I have the same one, do we really have the exact same one?
Seriously.
Look, no, we're all on the same page because I'm pretty forgiving. So really the characters, and I guess even this, like the feel of the characters, I guess I'm big for sense of humor and things like that. So I don't know. I think the characters are really the biggest thing that mattered to me. And I guess also the feeling of the story. Like my husband and I have been watching Rings of Power, and he's a bit of a Tolkien nerd, so he's got lots of issues with timeline and how big the world is and things like that. And none of that really bothers me. But the feeling of the world, the feeling of the characters, those kinds of things are sort of the only thing I'll complain about.
Yeah, I suppose there's also for me, okay, I'll come up with another one, Katrina, so that we can.
I mean, I'm sure we could whinge about
yes,
unfaithful adaptations for all day.
I think, and this is a bit nebulous, but especially when a book has a real magic to it, like you're just, I love this world, I love these characters, and then the movie, maybe it tries too hard to be faithful in a way, and it ends up just quite clunky. I actually, maybe controversially, but I felt this way about the Harry Potter movies, most of them, particularly the first one. Then I was like, there is all the plot and the things, but it just didn't have that warmth and that magic that the books did. Oh, Katrina's not happy about this. So I feel as though sometimes it's like, well, you do need to make those changes in order to make it work on the screen, rather than be so faithful and it kind of evacuated of its enchantment.
Well, I have to defer to you on that one, Natasha, because you are someone who grew up reading the Harry Potter books as a child.
Oh, no, I didn't. I was like a university student. Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I was a child, and I think that they were both filled with enchantment, but I was genuinely a child when I watched the first Harry Potter movie and I read it. And it blew my mind. But
well, see, I did the terrible thing of watching the movie.
Oh, Katrina.
I know, scandalous.
That's all right.
I'm catching up on the
there
book
is forgiveness.
Now. Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. Well, I better talk about my book before we run out of time. So I have finally read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owen. So I resisted reading this book for so long.
Still resisting.
I don't know why I do that. I have this thing where when everyone says, oh, it's wonderful, oh, you've got to read this book. And I had so many people saying that, oh, no, it's beautiful. And yet every time I would kind of pick up the book and I would read the blurb, I'd just go, oh, no,
Yep.
that sounds terrible. That sounds depressing. I don't want to read that, you know. But I finally gave in. And I'm really glad I did. I actually really liked it. So, gosh, I'll try to give you the skinny version. Kaya is a young girl growing up on the edge of the marshes. Her father's a veteran with PTSD. A lot of the time he's drunk and violent. And one day Kaya's beautiful mother walks away and doesn't come back, leaving her with just her older brother and her dad. And one by one, her brothers escape. And soon it's just Kaya with her drunk and unreliable dad. And I thought actually that Delia did a good job of portraying the complexity of living with an alcoholic because, you know, most of the time Kaya stays out of his way and looks after herself, but she also really craves his attention. And there are some peaceful periods where she and her dad go fishing together and they sort of exist in this uneasy truce. But of course, it doesn't last because her dad is an alcoholic. He returns to the drink and he disappears for long periods of time until one day when he disappears for the last time. And now Kaya, who's only very young, I think maybe 7-ish, is now alone in the marshes and she has to find a way to survive. So she has some skills that she learnt from her mother. She knows how to grow some things. She knows how to fish. So she survives by, you know, catching mussels, smoking fish and selling those things to a couple who own a boat ramp business. And so in return, she can get little amounts of grits and to eat and fuel for her boat and her kerosene lamp. So mostly she survives okay. And she becomes a sort of an expert on the bird life of the marsh. And through this interest in collecting things from the marsh, she meets a young fella named Tate. It turns out Tate was actually a friend of her brother's and knew Kaya when she was very small. And he cautiously reaches out to her by leaving her gifts of feathers on a tree stump, and gradually they become friends. Tate teaches Kaya to read, and they develop quite an intense relationship because Kaya's been alone for so long that, you know, her feelings for Tate are just magnified because he's literally the only person who's ever showed any care for her since her brother left her 10 years before. And so Tate is actually a scientist and he has to leave to go to college. And so while he's away and she's missing him so much, she gets to know another young man. His name is Chase Andrews. And several years later, it's Chase's body that turns up in the marshes and Kaya is blamed for his death. So a crucial piece of evidence is that Chase always wore this shell necklace that Kaya gave to him, but after his death, the shell necklace is missing from his body. And so Kaya becomes the prime suspect for his murder. And the story is sort of told in these two timelines. One is Kaya's sort of childhood growing up in the marsh, and the other is sort of from the moment the body is found. And so, yeah, for me, I really loved reading about Kaya's life in the marsh and how she sort of survives, and you learn so much about nature, about how the ecosystem works.
Is this like Florida?
Health of the marsh is crucial to the health of the ocean. Now, you've got me there. I'm going to have difficulty remembering.
Okay.
It wasn't the Mississippi.
Okay.
It wasn't Florida.
It's in America.
It's in America somewhere.
Cool.
Yeah. So basically you learn all about the marshes, and it also shows this slightly darker side to nature, like what animals will do to ensure their own survival. That's sort of a bit of an ominous thread running through it. So I really loved all that stuff, but I found the mystery timeline a little less compelling. So it transitions into a bit of a courtroom drama in the last part of the book. I didn't enjoy that quite so much because it felt a bit like it was trying To Kill a Mockingbird by sort of creating this sense that the defendant was subject to prejudice, but it sort of doesn't carry the same weight of history with it. You know what I mean? And you're also never really sure about Kaya's moral compass because she has been brought up wild, you know, and what choices she might make. So, yeah, so apparently it is set in North Carolina, which is not an area that I know anything about, sorry, other than what I found in this book. Anyway, but I really enjoyed the book. I have to confess, I haven't actually seen the movie yet because it gets 35% on Rotten Tomatoes
really?
from the critics, but it gets 97% from the audience.
Oh.
So what I'm thinking is that if you enjoyed the book, you probably enjoy the movie, but perhaps it doesn't hold up so well on its own, you know, if you haven't read the
Have
book.
you read this one, Ellanda, or seen it?
I've read the start of it, but I haven't finished it.
Is that because you didn't love
it? I'm doing audio, and
the narrator's a bit annoying, isn't she?
The narrator's a little bit annoying, and I don't go on enough road trips. So I sort of just forgot about it because I only had small chunks to listen to audio in.
Folding the washing, Ellanda, audiobook,
Yes,
fold
there
the
is
washing.
a lot of that
Tedious
to
job
do.
becomes interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it also, I don't know, maybe starts a little slow. Well, except for the murder. It opens with the murder. I don't know.
So my
It's just the
sister,
one murder.
my sister tried to read it and she found the same thing, like nothing's happening. But so for me, it is about that immersion in the marsh life. You'll either like that if you're into nature, or you'll be like, nothing's happening.
I think what you were saying earlier with how when someone tells you to read a book a bunch, you sometimes don't want to. And I think I had that a little bit. And I think it's sometimes when someone says a book is good, I'm like, yeah, but will it be fun? Because sometimes good books are like
a bit tiresome.
Yeah, a bit tiresome. That's a good way of putting it.
It's not tiresome, but it's not fun. It is interesting and compelling.
Yes.
I don't want to tell you to read it because then you're just going to resist me.
Is the writing good?
Well,
I feel like not notably so, but also
it's a bit neutral.
No.
Okay.
The detail and the vividness of the scene that she creates and the setting are really great. I think the relationships are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The writing's not like bowl you over. But as I said, I audiobooked it and I found the narrator a little irritating, a little bit of a whiny, the accent's a little bit whiny. But yeah, Kaya to me was a compelling character. I would stick with her. Yeah.
Okay. I'm still not going to read it. Sorry, Katrina. Maybe if someone foists it on me, I will. I'll get there.
I'll buy it for you for Christmas, Natasha, and then you'll
okay, I'll have to.
Anyway. All right. Well, that wraps up our Books on Screen episode of the Hope Book Club. Which one will you read? Let us know. bookclub@hopemedia.com.au. So here are the details of the books again. Natasha reviewed The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. Ellanda reviewed A Man Called Ove by Frederick Backman. And I reviewed Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owen. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club, because life's just better with book.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.